With around 90 days remaining until Arc Raiders releases on October 30, we have a new update in the Arc Raiders official Discord from the Embark Studios team. So let's take a look at that, as well as what we can expect between now and the game's launch. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, just know two things. I've been consistently following the development of Arc Raiders longer than any other content creator. So if you want to follow the OG Arc Raiders content creator, do the usual YouTube business right now. And also, I'm a member of Embark's creator program, so I've tagged this video as a promotion to keep that relationship nice and transparent. Anyhow, the last thing we heard from Embark Studios was in late June. So it looks like the current updates have a monthly cadence, but I think they'll change very soon. And I'll explain why later in the video. That late June post was some new info and a video that was posted on the Arc Raiders official Discord by Dusty on behalf of Sprinkle Mountain, who is self-described as the weapons guy and one of the combat designers here on Arc Raiders. Let's do a bit of a recap of that post before we dive into the new one, because I think it really puts the new post and what we might expect going forward into some context. They let us know that they're adding new content, sharpening what's already there, and making sure the encounters you'll get into are as thrilling, fair, and gratifying as they can be, which means a lot of balancing work based on all the data and feedback they gathered during Tech Test 2. They also learnt from Tech Test 2 that a few weapons and gadgets were bending the rules in ways that didn't align with their design intent, either by making fights too quick, too one-sided, or just not giving players the time or tools to respond. And Sprinkle Mountain added to that, writing, "And by the rules, I mean our combat pillars, the guiding principles that shape how Arc Raiders should feel when you engage with man or machine while topside." So I think he made it pretty clear that Embark have very defined ways that they want combat to unfold in the game and are balancing things to match that. He added, "Our combat is built on beats and flow. That means letting action ramp up and have room to breathe, not just explode and end in an instant. We want to linger in those moments where two players feel locked in, reading each other's actions and responding with their own." And some examples of likely changes were laid out by mentioning that weapons like the Arpeggio and Tempest had such a fast cadence and short TTK, those moments didn't have a chance to happen. We're tuning them to restore that flow. Other weapons that will receive apparent nerfs are the Anvil hand cannon and the Volcano shotgun. Weapons weren't the only thing to come under scrutiny. He wrote, "And yes, you were right, the heavy shields were way too strong, and shield swapping was way too efficient. So most likely shield swapping will be on the way out." Sprinkle Mountain wrapped up the post, writing, "We've got even more we're excited to show you at launch. New tools, new toys, new experiences. We're planning content that will hopefully meet your expectations and give you even more to build and bring along on your missions to the surface." And then we got to see a couple of these in the accompanying video, with an in-game crafted flame sprayer, which kind of looks a bit like a joke gadget, being made out of a fireball burner and a can of air freshener. And maybe more interestingly, the weapon on Sprinkle Mountain's back, which was an in-development hull cracker, which appears to be a 5-round 40mm grenade launcher, with its accompanying ammo box holding 12 rounds. That could make for some really interesting long-range grenade combat, with the ability to hoist grenades into some of the towers, balconies, and other lookout points from far afield. Also, how cool is this little TV radio thing? Imagine wandering into a building in Buried City and finding one of these has already been switched on, playing its little ditty. That's going to make you feel uneasy for sure. Anyhow, we now have a new post in the Arc Raiders Discord posted by Dusty on behalf of the Arc Raiders dev team. But it's essentially a summary of a chat they had with the game's design director, Virgil. And following the recap of the late June post with its focus on weapon and shield balancing, we can see that the focus moves neatly onto how players moved around topside and extracted from it, but also shows that as well as the devs having strong guiding principles that shape how Arc Raiders combat should feel, they are also willing to iterate on where players like to move around the environment. They write, Arc Raiders is, at its core, a game about taking risks. Balancing risk and reward, or what we call high stakes, is standard practice in game design, but it finds its peak in the Rust Belt. It's the cornerstone of our game mechanics, and those high stakes influence everything from the items you bring with you, the noises you make, the fights you pick, and the places you dare to go. The dangers you face and the choices you make to overcome them should always feel worth the rewards they yield. In a session of Arc Raiders, the clearest way we communicate risk is through the map screen. It highlights areas where you can expect to run into a greater Arc threat, either through numbers or type, but have high concentrations of valuable loot. Players naturally gravitate toward these hotspots, often leading to encounters with other raiders. From data in Tech Test 2, we could see that these high-risk areas were doing their job. They drew in more traffic, provided the best loot opportunities, and generated more player collisions. We did find some discrepancies that are being improved on now, like locked rooms that didn't provide enough value for the rarity of their keys and the difficulty of getting into them. I think a good example of that might have been the locked room in the dam testing annex, where the loot was pretty average for being in a hotspot and a locked room. We also saw high-risk areas which had great loot without a matching Arc presence. We're adjusting Arc spawns to give players a suitable challenge if they get there first. Adding my 2 cents in here, but I think I'd like to see some more variation of Arc machines that we find in the buildings. So it's not just turrets, fireballs, pops and ticks. Like we talked about in the recent episode 7 of Gecko's Arc Raiders podcast, where I appear as a regular guest, I'd like to see maybe a mother tick that roams inside the buildings and can crawl up on the walls and ceilings, and it's armed, so it's not just turrets that can shoot you indoors. The post continues with a really interesting part. The data also revealed unexpected hotspots, places we didn't intend to be frequented by players. We're investigating what drew players to those areas to find out what made them so interesting. Rather than trying to remove those points of interest, we're working on applying additional level design to enhance and embellish them as worthwhile areas to play in. This really shows how the Embark devs can not only set very clear guidelines for themselves on how they want Arc Raiders to play, but also how they're willing to observe how players play the game and run with some of those things where it works. They then give us a player movement heat map showing us player movement activity in the dam for the duration of Tech Test 2 and talk about how they can compare these to heat maps that they maintain for spawns, deaths, loot actions, Arc spawns, Arc deaths, PvP damage, PvE damage, extraction starts, successes and failures, and so much more. And they talk about that. For example, comparing this to heat maps for Arc behavior can help us determine places where the threat is too high or too low. Then they move on to what might be considered a hot topic, extraction points. Introducing that, they write, "Our main extraction points have no direct cost to use, but they draw a lot of attention from both Arc and other players. The longer you stay in a session, the number of available extractions steadily diminishes. Ultimately, it's up to the players to decide whether to chase more rewards at the cost of fewer and riskier ways out, or to escape safely with lighter bags." And then move on to something I've talked about in a previous video. Of course, there is another way to extract. Raider hatches. Hatches require hatch keys, which must be purchased, crafted, or found. The cost of using hatches means we can make them relatively quiet, quick, and place them in areas with less foot traffic. From data in Tech Test 2, we saw that these hatches were a very popular choice. In fact, high-level players used hatches a whopping 40% of the time. This is far more often than intended. Hatches, while safer, are also more boring to use, and they provide a 3-for-1 deal when extracting with a squad. We want heart rates to go up when trying to extract, and that can't happen when you can always quietly drop into a hole in the ground. This means we need to rethink how hatch keys are acquired and make sure that using one is a choice that needs to be carefully weighed and not something you can just rely on for every extraction. This pretty much falls exactly in line with what I talked about previously, that the cost of Raider hatch keys were too low and they need some balancing out. So I was delighted to read this. They wrap things up by writing, Leading up to launch, we'll continue to refine and balance extractions, loot areas, spawn locations, drone compositions, and many other things that one can encounter topside. A well-balanced mix of risk and reward is at the core of the heart-pounding experience we plan to deliver with Ark Raiders. Every decision you make and every second you spend outside of Speranza should feel important because each one could seal your fate. And lastly, they provide us with 4 images of extraction points, including this one that's from the new map teased in the release date trailer, which I've tentatively been referring to as the Northern Italy map. It's definitely the equivalent of a Raider hatch because it has the same key activation, but it appears to be some sort of cool gated zipline going down below. So all of that update sounds great. Embark are refining things based on the tech test, some things to fit their pillars of how the game should play, and some things based on how the players played the game. What's next then? Well, we know that pre-orders for the game will happen between now and launch, and I'm expecting that their marketing campaign proper will get underway probably just before pre-orders are available. So I don't think these monthly mini updates will be all we see between now and launch by any means, but they might continue through the marketing campaign. In mid-August, we have Gamescom, with opening night live happening at these times. If there's any opportunity between now and the end of October that seems fit for Ark Raiders pre-orders opening up, it's probably this event. That's what I'm putting my money on, no pun intended. Will we get another playtest between Gamescom and launch? I think given the way that the Embark team have talked about the game in those 2 posts, it's unlikely. They talk a lot about refining the game, balancing weapons, and nothing about any further testing. As far as stress testing the game goes, we can see on SteamDB that PC players peaked around 21,000 during the playtest, which is pretty similar to the numbers Embark see for the finals currently. So my guess is that they probably have a pretty good gauge for that side of things already. I really don't see them needing another playtest unless it's for marketing purposes, which, don't get me wrong, would be awesome. But if there is some kind of access before launch, I'd say it's way more likely to be something like some kind of pre-order access a week before the game launches, or something like that. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. Do you think we'll see pre-orders opening up at Gamescom opening night live? I'm also working on another Ark Raiders video dispelling some of the myths and misinformation about the game that I've seen out there, so keep an eye out for that coming soon. Thanks for watching the video to the end. A big thank you to the members of my channel for their ongoing support, especially my Black Tier members TJ and Thorinike17, and of course Embark Studios for having me as part of their creator program. Both are greatly appreciated. Do the usual YouTube business if you want to see more videos from me from now on. Give a like or comment as you see fit, and enjoy the rest of your day. Kia kaha, stay strong.
Everybody knows the world ain't right. Down on your knees, get up and fight.